Games, board games. We'll talk about what is meant. Board games to have a game agent. And we'll talk about what they do. And if a game agent is the right thing for you, we will ask questions and learn together. By which I don't mean Anita, I mean whoever is watching this here video. Anyway, let's ask some questions and find out, increase the stuff we know. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. Time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 816. What is a game agent? And we're going to chat about, what a game agent is. What do you do? Why would myself or any other designer want to work with you? What do you look for? What does a game agent look for? What is the process like? And what makes a good game agent? What should you be looking for in a game agent? And if you wanted to be a game agent, would you have the skills necessary to do that? Anita, before you get, into the typical everyday topics, do you have anything you would like to say of this? If people don't know you, who are you? What is White Castle, and what's going on with where you are?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me here again. As you already said, I'm the owner of the White Castle Games Agency based here in Vienna. And as a board game agency for game designers, what we do is summed up. We look for interesting new game ideas that match what the publishers we work with are looking for. And we also we license those game ideas from the game designers and then relicense them to suitable publishers. And in between this process, we also support the game designer with optimizing the game, with play tests, with whatever the particular designer needs maybe help with, and prepare the presentations and such, and also negotiate the deal with the publisher and take care of license payments, royalty reports, so that everything is done in a correct way by the publisher.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to get a little bit more into some of these things. I did put posts on Facebook and Twitter to ask if any people had any questions. Have you looked at this post, or are these going to be a surprise to you?
It's going to be a surprise. I haven't seen it.
No worries. Well, I'm looking forward to asking you these things. But first of all, I would like to ask you, what is a typical day like? What have you been up to since we last spoke yesterday? Let's talk about some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. I mean, myself, I was saying before we started that I'm not in a good state of mind recently, to be honest. But I did manage to get myself out of the house to go to an appointment where I was, and I did express how I was feeling, and not gonna lie, kind of pretty much talked at someone for a couple of hours, which kind of takes its own kind of, like, it feels like an achievement. Also, when I got back home, I had a relatively healthy meal. I mean, I made myself put a pre-made quiche into the oven, but with some salad, with some cucumber and pepper, and I should have used some tomatoes. I've got a whole bunch of tomatoes that I never used. Damn. But yeah, it was just cucumber and spinach and pepper. But yeah, I was happy with that meal. Splash of vinegar, splash of, and that felt like an achievement. And just sometimes, getting out it. That was itself, it was a less rubbish day than some days have been recently. But how about you? I mean, you are actually, unlike myself, you're working with other people. You've got lots of stuff going on. I hope that yesterday was not a bad day for you. I hope you're generally in a decent state of mind. And can you tell us what a typical day is like at for the owner of White Castle?
Yeah, so yesterday was a pretty typical day. I spent a lot of time, as I said, I work with people, with a lot of different people. So I spent a lot of time with communication, informing people about our latest play tests, how did like summing up feedback, asking publishers who we are waiting for feedback, what's the status of games. I dealt with finalizing a contract for a game that we are about to sign. And I finished translating a rule for a prototype and sent a shipment to a publisher who requested that prototype. I did some cutting, finishing that prototype that we sent. Yeah,
okay.
So some printing and cutting. So like what you as a game designer know very well too. And in the evening, it was Monday evening. So on the Mondays, we have our weekly meeting of game designers. And that was a brilliant meeting, actually. It was not so crowded as the last ones. There were like really lots of people there, the last Mondays. And then this time it was a bit more quiet. We were, I think, 6 people. But that was also nice. There was a new person there. Which I always find nice, that if I meet someone at an event and I tell them about this weekly meeting and they actually show up, and this person was like working on games, hasn't published anything yet, hasn't finished anything yet, to a point where they go, yeah, that's what I want to present to someone or I want to share, but I would like to peek into how do others work, how does it look like, how like just to lose the fear of presenting your own game. I think it helps to go to a game design event where prototypes are tested. And so that person really enjoyed.
Because presumably then everyone's doing a bit of pitching just to the other designers. So it's a relatively low stakes environment compared to showing it off to a publisher or whatever.
Yeah, so it's really about playtesting. So it's not about pitching your game. It's really about like.
But I mean, when we play test on Fridays, I know that. I mean, if we only have one game running at a time, that's like astonishing. It's ridiculously quiet. But normally we have at least 2 games running, every 2 hours. It's a new slot, and then people will play their games. And then what happens, for us at least, is that the designers get about 10 seconds, 20 seconds each to stand up and say, this is my game. Obviously, if it's a newcomer, after we'll let them go on a bit, but after 30 seconds, we might ask them to kind of wrap it up quickly, because it's not about telling us the rules. It's just about saying, hey, this is a combat game. It's got real-time elements. It's got bag building. It's going to take about an hour. Hopefully, we will finish it before the slot ends. And something as short as that. Or Ellie might say, hey, I've got a variety of family games that are all about 20 minutes, and we'll play a whole bunch of them together. And then I wonder if there's something similar going on where you are, where it's not quite a pitch, but it's a, hey, this is what my game is, so that other people can self-select, so that you don't get someone who's completely brain dead that day playing the most complex game.
Yeah, true. Usually we do, it's like we have the first half hour of the evening as reserved for just chatting and I don't know, getting back in touch if you haven't seen each other for quite a while, and also for like clarifying who brought which games. And as we meet so often, and there's a big core of regulars, usually we know a lot of the games already. So just by saying that, so I brought again this and that game, we already know more or less what it's about. And also the designers themselves know, okay, this time I want to try it with someone who has already played a previous version, or I would rather play with someone who has not played it at all yet. So we try to form first groups, and just in the meanwhile ask, like, is it okay for you to play this and that game? I tend to organize it a little bit.
Okay, so you'll already know all the games that people are bringing, and so you can hopefully match people with games that they will be able to give some feedback on.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's not that I'm like organizing it all. I just try to orchestrate it to my feeling what I
Understood.
think. Yeah.
I mean, I think this ties into, playtesting and development. I mean, hopefully we can. Oh, firstly, I want to say hello to Xate. It is lovely to see you, and I hope you're having a lovely morning. Thank you for jumping in, and sorry it took me a bit of time to get to you. And hello, Rita. It is lovely to see you, as always. It's a beautiful YouTube profile picture. And playtesting and being with other designers is a brilliant thing, brilliant thing. It's a little thing which is brilliant. I mean, let's go back and forth very quickly. I think it's brilliant because, designers are good at not just saying, I don't like it, but also verbalizing why they don't like it and really pinpointing those things. Why do you think it's brilliant?
For exactly the same thing. So first of all, I'm really a lot into observing. So I am sometimes a really harsh play test manager, let's say. So I sometimes let players make their mistakes, misunderstanding the rules, and see how far it takes them, or where it takes them, or at which point maybe they realize they've played it the wrong way. Depending on the stage of the game, of course, and on what you want to find out in that stage. I think
because
that's
the games that are being play tested here, I guess, are maybe closer to the stage of development rather than the stage of initial design, I guess.
well, on the Monday evening, you can also come with a very first draft. So quite often, someone shows up with I just got this out of the printer, and I had the idea last night. So this is also okay, but once they are a bit more developed, I really like to do that hardcore testing. So I really like
Yeah,
the observing.
100%.
So for me, the brilliant thing about it is to see, that idea that someone has in their mind, like connect with the real world. And sometimes this it comes to life, and something slightly different evolves than what you imagined it. And sometimes that's beautiful, and sometimes that doesn't work. But I really like to see what happens when it really comes to life. That's for me a very interesting thing. And of course, the like verbalizing afterwards each tester's experience and comparison to other games that they've played before, that they put it in the same shelf with, or what they liked or disliked, or which core or which element they would rather focus on if it were their choice. That's also a very interesting thing to do, and of course a bit different with game designers than with the
Yeah, I think
regular
that one
testers.
thing is that for me, I think that the final testing is always best with people who, are just the target audience, whether or not they're experts. But if you're playing with experts, then in the middle stages, especially, they can be like, oh, well, here's another game that's similar. And then maybe you try to distance yourself from the other game and accentuate the differences. Or conversely, maybe you look at the other game and you sort of learn from the other game. Because I'm not going to lie, a lot of the inspiration for Yogi came from, after the first 60-70% was done, I got a lot of inspiration from Dancing Eggs, because then I was like, oh wait, I can see a lot of similarities. You balance the eggs here, and then it was like, okay, let me make sure that I've got the cards in all the places where it could fit. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have one between the legs because that didn't feel right for Yogi, the original, but it was just a way of checking and maybe inspiring and maybe looking to see. Obviously, don't copy, but if you have a couple of things, I think that's totally reasonable to see how someone else did it. By the way, I looked at the new game that's coming out, and the difference between that and Ruffle is that Ruffle is all about you're trying to shorten a phrase, whereas the game that you were talking about yesterday, you're trying to give hints at a phrase or word, and because you're not allowed to use that phrase or word, it's kind of more of a taboo. It mixes up a bit more, so it's kind of definitely slightly different. And so I was glad to have a quick look yesterday, and once I understood that from the Board Game Geek description, I was like, okay,
Mhm.
cool. Like it's
Okay.
not just a reworking.
Thank you very much for that, because I still had it on my list to check that out. So I can tick that off my list now.
I mean, John Koblick might feel differently. And Elaine, thank you so much. Yeah, I absolutely consider you a friend. Thank you for including us in that. And today, I mean, having a lovely chat. It's going well for me so far. I hope it's going well for you as well, Anita. But as always, at this point, I want to just remind everyone, comments, ask questions from like follow. I do have some questions that I'm going to get straight into, but if anything is unclear along the way, please do ask us. Otherwise, I'll just assume that I'm doing a good job. So firstly, what is a game agent? I mean, we can read it on your website, but for people who don't like reading or are here to hear it straight from your mouth, how would you describe it?
Yeah. So yeah, similar to what I've said in the introduction, a game agent brokers game ideas. So or our team looks into new ideas, licenses them, and then relicense them to publishers. So what we do are, on the one hand, we are, from the perspective of the game publisher, we are a filter that gets through, like that see through the many ideas of the many game designers which are out there these days, and present to them ideas that it's worthwhile for them to look at and maybe check them out. And from the game designer's perspective, what we do is make their games visible if they don't have maybe the connections or the skills, or I don't know, or they don't like pitching themselves, maybe, to make their games visible, and also find a suitable publisher, the best suitable publisher for their game. It's a bit like a music agent or a book, like a writer's agent.
I mean, since you brought up music, we've got a question about your band. What instrument did you play? I mean, I don't think Elaine was here yesterday. And what kind of music was it? Can you explain very quickly?
It was an alternative rock, I'd say a bit 90-ish alternative rock. And I played the vocals.
Okay, and I will try to share some of the links that you gave me in the comments so people can go and look up those YouTube videos or whatever if they want to hear more of this. So from the perspective of, why work with a game agent? From the perspective of a designer, I guess it's minimizing the amount of work you need to do. Is there anything more to it than that? Like, you take care of the development.
I think my connection just... Hello. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
And the
Here I am again. Can you hear me now? Sorry, I froze.
I think I'm back. I think that might have been me.
Okay.
Yeah. And yes, it's why work with game agents.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, okay. So yes, a big part of that is taking off part of the workload. Particularly if you are an experienced, well-connected designer, you don't need maybe the other aspect of the agency, which is knowing where to pitch your game and having like how do you say, like a foot in the door. Like we are in touch with like most of the bigger and smaller publishers from all over the world, and so we have a really broad perspective on where a game could be placed and what opportunities there could be. We also get a lot of like background information from different publishers of what they're currently looking for and what they're not looking for, what they're going to publish in the future, for which slot maybe they are looking for something right now very specifically. also particularly US, the big US publishers send out briefings to like some developers and agencies. So particularly if you are a newcomer, maybe with no release yet, I think it's also a good way to get some visibility instead of like getting a lot of doors shut before someone opens it for you.
I mean,
and that's also because a lot of just for sorry to finish that. I think that a lot of newcomers think that editors, publishers, product acquisitors, however you call them, are nasty because they don't look at their stuff. But it's also because they don't have the time to look at all this stuff.
100%.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good thing. And if they don't know you, if they don't know what you've done before, they just can't be sure if it's worthwhile to additionally look at this game instead of looking from someone who you already know can do it. And so if it comes from an agency, they know it's been played, it's been tested, the rules are usually understandable, the game works, and it, on top of all that, it could fit what they usually do. So that's it's a couple of pros for the publishers to look at the game. And even if it's something that might not fit in there will be a reason that I show it to them, because I think, oh, this is so exceptional, even though it usually wouldn't fit your portfolio. You do want to look at it because it's really interesting. And maybe if it comes from a newcomer with that argument, they would say, maybe rather not. But if it comes from someone they already know, and we know a lot of people, then they would probably look at it anyway.
Are there, I mean, I'm curious to know about which publishers you work with. I mean, you don't need to give a full list of everything, because, you know, that would just be you spouting a long list of words at me. But in some industries, they sometimes say agents need not apply. They want people to apply themselves. And have you ever seen that from any board game publishers where they say, actually, we don't want to work with an agent. We just want to work directly with designers?
Yep, I've experienced that too. So there's both ways. So there are some which avoid new concepts from no filter gatekeeper institution, and there are others who say they don't want to work with an agency for different reasons. So there, from a publisher once I heard that they just don't want to sign a contract for that conditions, and if they negotiate with the author themselves, then they don't have to give that good conditions to the author. Or I also heard twice, I remember, that it's just their policy and or the boss's policy, and they can't really give an argument reason why. But that's okay. I mean, there's so many publishers out there, and there's so many game designers out there. So not every game designer needs to work with an agency or needs an agency, and not every publisher needs to do that. I think it's a beautiful, diverse industry. So I think there's space for everyone.
Yeah, for a whole wide variety of approaches. Elaine wants to understand, are different agents working with specific publishers?
Yes and no. So I can best speak, of course, from my perspective. And of course, when you know someone and have experience working with a company, it's easier to work with them again, unless it was a fatal project. So of course, we also tend to go back to the same publishers when we have good experiences. Particularly, like, for example, one thing is Moses. We do a lot of games with Moses because we really understand what they are looking for, and we have a lot of game designers who do that kind of games, for example. So we are really good in judging that. But also we work with other publishers who keep turning down everything we show them. But in the end, there will be one project because we understand very well what they like and what they don't like. And at some point, there will be the right timing. That doesn't answer the question yet. So, but yes, so there are agencies who focus, like we have a lot of good contacts, for example, with particularly the German industry and with the US industry. And then there's, for example, an agency in France who have very strong ties to French publishers just because they are there. There are agencies who focus more on pre-production. So they try to, particularly for like plastic intense kids games and stuff like that. So they have the prototypes pre-produced and then like license out the whole like ready to produce product. We work with prototypes. So we usually, I mean, we do work with 3D prints and everything, but we don't do that. We don't push the project that far. So they would usually work with more toy-ish focused publishers, for example. So yeah,
Okay,
I
so
think
what you're saying is that if something is a bit more toy focused, and a bit more to do with, okay, you're spinning this thing and then dropping things into the spinning thing, you might not be the best agent to work with. It might be someone else, or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
Yes and no. So if it's doable in a prototype way, we are actually pretty good at that because, as I said, we have strong ties to the Mattels and Hasbros and Spin Masters and so in the world. But if it's a really complicated way to figure out how to make the prototype work, and it's a lot about the particular way of how the toy works, the toy
Okay,
parts.
so what you're saying is that in your, in your studio, you have the skill set of developing it in terms of the rules, but not necessarily the skill set of engineering exactly how the magnet should be. Like the clacky thing from Connect for Spin, if I came to you saying, hey, I've got the idea and I described it all perfectly, but I wanted someone to do the engineering of it, I should find an engineer to work with it before I pitch it to someone, basically.
Yeah, true.
Or if
Although,
I'm pitching it to an engineer, I guess if I really had that perfect idea, maybe I should find the engineer or some small studio that does more engineering of magnets and flicky stuff. Is that what
although
you're
I
saying?
mean, yeah, that
Okay.
pretty much nails it. I also like what we also, for example, don't look at are very complicated, complex gamers games. And if someone submits something like that to us, then I would either recommend to like go to a specific, I don't know, convention of game designers where they could present it themselves, or to someone else who is focusing on that kind of games.
That's useful because someone else talks about what exactly are you looking for. It sounds like you want things that have been made. You don't want to do the engineering, and you don't want things that are too complex. So on Board Game Geek, what sorts of weight rating would you say this is too complex? Are we talking like 2 out of 5 and above is a bit too complex, or?
I'm not so much into the detail of the BGG rating, I must say. But if we like for the Spiel des Jahres comparison, for example, for the awards, so we are very experienced in the kids and family game sector, and also the lower Kennerspiel, maybe.
Okay.
So everything that's below an hour, definitely. So if there's a game that's longer than an hour, it's probably not for us. If it's got a lot of chrome, if it's got a lot of detailed rules, very,
So what you're saying is something
expert.
like, it's not that these are bad games, but Agricola or Nova Cry or whatever, these might be games that you'd say, hey, this is great, and let me suggest. What kind of feedback would you give with that? Because someone actually asked about the feed. They are worried. I mean, I can understand it. It's like a worry for myself as well. Like you pay the $85, and then it's like, well, if it gets rejected, firstly, what proportion of things do get rejected and why, and what comes back to it? Because in the board game, in the Facebook thread, someone was like, oh, do you get no answer? That would be the worst possible thing. To which someone else replied, no, I've worked with White Castle. They do give you very nice feedback. But can you describe it in your own words? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So let me first answer so I don't forget it. The question about what would I tell someone with a game that's out of our range. And so I do personally, I play more complex games and I enjoy them. But I am not an expert business-wise in those games. So what I can give is my private player feedback, mixed, of course, with my experience working on games and such, but I'm not good in pointing, like, I know exactly which publisher you'd have to show it to, because I know that they will definitely look at it. So I can give that regular playtesters feedback to those for those concepts. But as we usually would say that we don't look at it. And concerning the fee, so there are 3 ways of presenting a game to us. One is through the this service with the fee. Anyone can send us a prototype, and we recommend to send something within that range that we describe on our website as well. Then we will have our test groups play the game, write a report. Then we also look at it in the office or play it here and complete a report. And then you will actually get a feedback report, including like subjective experience from the play test, also like a meta analysis of the game, which parts work nicely, which are maybe not very unique or not very well designed or lack something, or maybe where it's even broken. And also a little market research, so comparing that game submission to other games which are already on the market, which would be the competitors, or even if there's maybe a game that's just too close to it. And then a final like sum up of why or why not we would like to offer or not a contract for this game. So what you definitely get is this test review, which we really put a lot of time and effort into, and the 85 euros. I know it's a lot of money, but compared to the work that we do with the game till that point, it's actually not a lot of money. But as I said, there are 2 more ways of submitting a game to us. So one is to just meet us at the weekly meeting in Vienna here. So if you are close by, or sometimes we get people who are on holidays and connected with pitching the game. Or Rita shows up every now and then from coming over from Munich. See you in December. Or see you on Friday, actually, online. So that's one way of showing us something. And you can also arrange a personal meeting, either on one of the events or conventions, fairs, whatever that we attend, or in an online meeting. So there we have reserved several hours per week for such game pitching sessions that you can arrange with Andy, with my colleague. And whenever you present to us something in person, that we don't charge for that. The downside of it is that we take the freedom to maybe after 10 minutes say, okay, this is not a game that I want to look further into. I understood it, and I can give you my quick feedback that we're not interested in it because this or that. So you would not get a full-scale report on that. So if you are maybe a newcomer trying to like learn or get more experience,
if you're someone
design,
based in the USA, I mean, obviously, it sounds like, worst case scenario, you get this intense report. And what kind of reasons are there for rejection? I mean, is it that it's too? I mean, I can think of a whole bunch, but yeah, what kinds of games are you looking for? You already mentioned if it's high in the Kennerspiel des Jahres, like in complexity, you don't want it. And I guess there needs to be a certain level of, game design already done. You can't be coming, hey, here's an idea. Please work out the engineering solution to this. But beyond that, I mean, and obviously market similarity, I mean, what other aspects are there? And please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. That's... I mean, we don't have a checklist on what does the game have to do. So we want to sign it or not. But in this regard, we work similar to publishers, but with a lot more different focuses, I'd say. So if I'm an editor at a game publishing house, I look at the game and I test the game, and I see, well, what does it... So I check, does it work, like mechanically? I check there's another part that's is it fun? Like, are players enjoying it? I mean, fun doesn't have to mean it's ha 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 fun laughing, but do players enjoy it? Do they remember it, and do they want to play it again? And then the third thing I look at is, do I think that I can sell it to someone? Is there any publisher in my mind that I think, oh yeah, I'd like to pitch it to that person because I think they would at least test it? So I have these three ways of looking at a game. And if, for example, mechanically there's something a bit broken, or the balance is not well, or maybe the end of the game is not yet greatly designed, but I mean, usually you know pretty quickly, even if you don't have the idea of how to solve it, that it's definitely solvable if you take a further look. So that's, if I think that we can work the game mechanics out, even if it doesn't work 100% yet, but the other two things apply. Like, it's fun, players enjoy it, players want to play it again, and I think that there's at least a publisher who I'd like to show it to, then I would definitely offer a contract. On the other way around, if it mechanically works perfect, but either I can't think of any publisher who'd want this game, either because they all have one at the moment, because, you know, there's these waves of, I don't know, the roll and writes, for example. So if it's a nicely designed, good roll and write game, maybe like a year ago, a lot of publishers wouldn't want to have looked at it, because it's like, yeah, we've seen like hundreds of those recently. So that's more of a reason to reject it. Either it's been done so many times, I don't see someone who I could pitch it to, or it works nicely, but it's, I don't know, it doesn't.
It's not doing
people.
anything special.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, someone. I'm just going to read out some questions directly. So Chris Bocke asked, what are the differences in pitching you a game versus how a designer might pitch a publisher? In other words, what should a designer be doing differently when showing you a game?
Okay. I think there doesn't have to be a lot of difference, but you can take the freedom when pitching to us, that if you know some of your flaws in the game, you could definitely point them out. I mean, I think that's also something that you can do when pitching to a publisher, if they have a certain trust in your skills of designing. But you can definitely do that and point out, so this is the core idea. This is what I think makes this game brilliant, what makes this game shine compared to the others. I haven't figured out everything on the way yet, but this is my core idea, and it works so far. Maybe it lacks something. Maybe you find that something. Maybe you can just point out where it lacks, and then I find it myself as a designer. So that's definitely something that you can take advantage of when working with us. Because the publishers, I mean, sometimes they pick up games which are not 100% developed, and then this process continues, you know, between the publisher and the game designer. But not for every slot they have, and not for every game they publish, they can take that time, even though they maybe wanted to. So sometimes publishers also recommend to game designers, hey, there's something in there. Have you ever tried contacting White Castle? Maybe you can figure it out together.
And so coming to you, it sounds like you are able to be more aware that this game might need something else. And if you're able to come already having identified the flaws, but not having found the solutions, you're able to be a bit more upfront and hopefully take advantage of the development parts of the process. Jeffrey Allers asks, if I've already extensively pitched a game and not been able to sign it, is it still beneficial to show it to an agent?
That depends on the game, of course. Yes, so there are, particularly with well-established game designers, I realized that they sometimes come to us with ideas that they were like, I really like this game. I don't know why nobody signed it yet. What's wrong with it? And then sometimes it's because they keep working with the same partners over and over again, and they maybe don't have the time, or they don't enjoy working with somebody else or looking for someone else or are afraid to work with someone else. And so maybe they just, maybe we have then someone that they didn't think of. But maybe it's also the game. So yeah, it does make sense to show us games which you as a designer are really convinced of and can't understand why nobody picked it up yet. Maybe we have the idea, maybe what was missing so far, or maybe who might be that perfect publisher for it. We also do sometimes, like someone shows us a game and then I think about, okay, everybody's seen it, like everybody's passed on it, but we have this one publisher that you think it could fit. So if it's okay with you as a designer, maybe even without signing the whole agreement, blah, blah, maybe we just come to a simple agreement that we are allowed to show it to that one publisher. And if they turn it down, you just get the rights back for the game right away. But if we can place it there, then we sign the agency contract. That's also something that we sometimes do. Because it doesn't make sense. If we only see this one opportunity, it doesn't make sense for us to sign a contract for 1.5 years. And then it just lies around here because we don't know who else to show it to.
Now, I would like to ask a bit more about how the pitching and negotiation process goes, because you've talked about you've got access to so many publishers, and sometimes there's a game where it would be fine to pitch it to a smaller publisher because you've already shown it to, Hasbro's. Obviously, Hasbro's probably the number one choice for lots of people, or Mattel, because they're going to, print a lot more units. And then, if they don't like it, as a designer, I would then look at other people who are going to print at least, 20,000 copies, which is, okay, they are medium-sized publishers. Of course, I've been treated very well by Gigamic, who are meant to be doing like 50,000 copies every year of Yogi, which is fantastic. Wondering, sorry, I was just wondering. I hope they don't mind me saying that. But anyway, it's like
more or less.
Yeah, but then you get to smaller publishers, and I'm not gonna lie, there's some smaller publishers that have aspirations. Okay, we sometimes manage to get into Barnes and Noble, which is great, but they don't know if they can do it. And then you've got the smaller publishers who are just starting off, and it's like, well, I'll filter down. That's my approach as a designer. That's I start publishing to the biggest rewards first, and then I felt only once, they've started saying no, do I go down? And interestingly, I've not signed anything, but potentially, let's talk completely hypothetically, which I should get better at doing. If I'd made a game about cute comical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises, and then I'd showed it to a bunch of publishers, and like all the big publishers at Spiel had said, no, we're not sure about this. But then, there's someone in the UK who I'm like, yeah, they can, they've managed to get things into the USA, so they're not my first choice, but now I'm willing to sign with them. And if they hadn't done it, then I might have even, but it also depends on the game, like what the opportunities for that are, because I've also got to consider, well, that game, I have higher hopes for it, whereas a different game, I might have slightly lower hopes. And there's another game that I've got, which is going to be published by Surprise Terror Games. I've talked with Alan Paul, and, it's been going on a ridiculous amount of time, and it's probably going to be a couple of thousands of copies, and that's fine, because it's a weird, like brainy game that is meant to confuse you and be slightly obscure. But yeah, how do you time the things, and how much do you work to get the best possible deal? Obviously, it's mutually beneficial, but I'd like to ask about that process on your end.
Well, I think you described the process pretty well already. So there's we work in this regard. We work on all of those stages. We work similar to game designers would, and similar to the editors and how they would work. So it's just a mix. We also do a lot of going down. Like if we think that this is for a major publisher, we would maybe give them a first chance to check it out. And if they don't pick it up, maybe also go to publishers who would start with smaller quantities. But I mean, every game is so individual. It's not always like that. And I've learned in the past that working with the biggest is not always to the best outcome. Sometimes it is. But if you are in the big portfolio of a publisher who like publishes 50 games a year, then you're just maybe one small grain there. But if you are 1 out of 5, maybe, then your
Or
game will
Days
get,
of Wonder, who just basically do one really big release every year, and
for
you
example.
go through Spiel, and it's like, wow, they've got this big display for heats, and of course they're going to put all their marketing focus into this one thing, and a lot of consumers will trust them because this is their one big release of that year.
Yeah, so that it doesn't. So we do that as you described, but there are also games where we check out. Okay, who do we think it's the best? Could it get the best response with? And who could do the project best? Maybe. So that's one thing, and then also, we do the going from top to bottom as well. We also keep track of a lot of, so who's looking for what. I think I already mentioned that. And so I know if someone is really looking for a specific genre or category of games and haven't seen anything very good in that category for a while, then they'd probably give this game a lot of focus. So this could also be an interesting choice for that. We also had the case that, so we don't exclusively show games to just one publisher unless maybe they offer an option. So we usually show it to various and also hand out prototypes for testing at the same time, telling everyone that that's the case. And so we also had the case that maybe two publishers were wanted the same game at the same time. And then it's also a mix of, it's maybe not always the money, it's not always the percentage, it's also how good, I mean, if you get a good negotiated royalty percentage of a game that dies after the first print run, that's not as worthwhile as maybe saying, okay, now maybe for the first print run we accept that royalties are a bit lower, but once several copies were sold, they raise, and so the publisher, even if it's a smaller one, gets a chance to figure out to get that game placed on the market, and because they believe so much in it and work so much for it, it will get a bigger audience in the end. And so what happened, for example, with our bestseller game Smart 10, we spoke about it yesterday. It's the first print was with Martinex, a small Finnish, or like here not well known Finnish publisher, and they were so convinced of that game. They were so like, this is gonna be the thing, and they did make it the thing. So it's available in more than 15 languages now, and they did a really good job for it because everyone there believed it, even though the first print run was only several thousand copies.
That makes a lot of sense. It's also not just about what resources they've got, but how many of those resources they're willing to allocate to this game. And a quick hello to Maya, who says, I accidentally decided to click your stream again. Haven't had a chance to watch you recently, but then I did and saw someone I recognized with you and I had to watch. So thank you for joining. And I do have a bunch of questions to finish getting through. But if you have any additional questions and I haven't already asked them before you got here, then might put it through. One question, which I think I already know the answer of this, but someone asks, do you help develop personal brand management? So someone's looking for some sorts of counseling to help. Marshall Miller is looking for someone to help develop, promote a designer, their personal brand as a designer, in addition to the prototypes that the agent is shopping around. Is that something that you do? And if not, can you recommend someone else?
Yeah, it's not something we do. Also for two reasons. So we do sign games single games, we don't sign the game designer. So it's not like with an artist's agency where I sign the game designer for a certain time and then they have to do all the projects through us. No, every game designer can still do their projects with other publishers on their own and still sign one game with us where maybe they, I don't know, have got lost in a dead end with the game. So this is one reason it doesn't make sense in that regard to promote one designer in personally when taking from the others just the games. And also I think it's a different kind of expertise that you'd need. And I am not sure if there's anyone in the board game industry who actually does that. It sounds more like an artist's agent style of working.
Or a musician's agents like whether that's a visual artist or a musician or indeed a film artist, I guess.
Yeah. I think that most game designers who to have the objective of becoming that personal brand I'd rather recommend to do a lot on their own maybe, or have the agent do the stuff that maybe they are not so much interested in, keep the workload off of them so that they can be creative and communicate their skills at the same time themselves or together with the marketing of the publishers.
I mean, one piece of advice I'll offer for anyone wanting to develop their own personal brand for free is come on to shows. I mean, there's a whole bunch of podcasts and shows, including this stream, where, sure, if you're based in America, this is at a terrible time for you. But, there's a lot of American shows, and We're Not Wizards, I'm shouting them out. I've been on their show a few times, and always a lovely... There's a whole bunch of shows that you can go on, and then people who are into it will be looking at that. And yeah, it's about trying to offer value. I think there's tips that you can get, and I don't feel like I would be the best person to give people opportunities, but I will also say that if you think, hey, Bez has done a great job, I want to learn from Bez, I do actually hire myself out. If you want to pay me for a couple of hours of work, I can do consultation or whatever. So
yeah, true, because you are a brand somehow. Brand, it sounds so thingy, but that's very good advice. I will remember that in the future.
What's the most important skill for being an agent? What makes you a good agent? And are you looking for other people to join your team? What would make them good agents?
Of course, it's very important to know games. Everyone here who started to work here has been into games before that. So there has to come a basic skill for that. We don't have to study something particular. So everything else you can learn by doing maybe. What you have to have as a skill is be observant and a good listener and a good observer. For the pitching, for example, reading a room, reading a person is very important, knowing what the person responds to. So particularly, that's also a tip for everyone who pitches themselves, try to remember what a particular person responds to, because there are people who like to listen, there are people who like to see, there are people who like to see the content of the game, there are people who don't like to see the content of the game. They just want to hear 4 tag words or something and then decide if they want to know more. Try to remember that. So this is something I think that's very important when looking at a game, also as well as when pitching a game. Language skill is also something very vital, because we work internationally. We work with different with different people from all over the world, and the more at ease you are with at least German or at least English, let's say it like this, the more at ease you will be in communicating with international people.
That makes a lot of sense, and I find it really interesting how you prioritized the skills of listening and observation and then pondering that, actually acting on that. I guess it does tie in slightly into the developmental skill of analysis and considering the ramifications of any particular rule change or any systems change. Because for sure, at a certain point, like I mentioned yesterday, right now for my combat game, I'm figuring out, well, does hexagons work or do squares work? And part of that is just observing. And, I could just play them both, and that's what I will have to do. But for sure, part of that, I find I am in my mind pondering, well, with hexagons, you have to turn more. So maybe I want to make the turns now, cost less rather than saying one turn is 1 footstep, like so 90 degrees. Like maybe I just say, okay, 2 footsteps, you can turn as much as you want, something like that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, there's a chain of things maybe to alter when altering the component.
yeah, and like it's a small thing, but obviously that gives me a slight leg up over someone who would just, change the two versions without making any other changes to accommodate the fundamental change. Um, but we've got a few quick questions from Jeff Belltower, who asks, firstly, what is the current evaluation time? Oh, that's meant to be a big banner. What is the current evaluation time?
It takes up to 3 months if you send in through that €85 system. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes we stretch it to the very end, but that's the thing. And if you want to present us a game, like one of those slots in person online, usually within 3 or 4 weeks or so, there's a time slot available. Maybe sometimes a bit more. But...
So you book those slots ahead of time. So I can't just come to Vienna next time you're running a designer meeting and expect to magically,
Oh, for the regular meeting, yes, you could just show up. So the Monday evening is free for all. Everybody is welcome as long as they behave nicely.
That's not where you're being evaluated. The evaluation is a slightly separate date, or?
The evaluation, so we have slots on Wednesday evening or afternoon evening and Thursday morning so that we can be available for everyone internationally and also depending on your working hours. But for the Monday evening, if you come to our weekly meeting once with a game, you don't have to sign a contract right away. It's not like you have to work with the agency at that point. If you come there and you test it and then you walk home with that feedback and you continue on your own, that's fine. But if you come up several times, always with the same game, and it becomes like a White Castle evening game, then we expect that we can also have that game in our portfolio. So, it's not. We don't want to create a pitching atmosphere on the Monday evening. We want to create a playtesting atmosphere. But
100%. So it sounds like you would prefer people if they are. So for those who cannot get to Vienna, you need to pay the 85. It will take about 3 months. It will take 3 months or less, I should say. It will take up to 3 months. 3 months is the guarantee, and it will normally take a bit less time. But if you want to get to have a meeting, if you're able to get to Vienna and they can say, hey, I want to pitch some games to you and see what you think of them, then you can have a vaguely informal thing, but you will book that ahead of time. And I guess you get an answer straight away once you've shown the game. But then it will be, you've got to ask maybe a few weeks before you're planning to go to Vienna. If going to Vienna is a big deal for you, don't just assume that you'll be able to fly to Vienna from a totally different country and then get a last minute meeting.
Yeah, it's always worth coming, but yeah. And then also, of course, we attend the events. We also met in Essen, for example. So if you go to Essen, if you go to Nuremberg, if you go to, I don't know, Cannes, check out on our website. You will always see where we go next. And you can just get in touch before the fairs, before the conventions, whatever it is where we go, and book a meeting with us there. So you don't have to go to Vienna.
And Maya, I'm glad that this is a question you wanted to ask, so that means I'm doing a good job. Thank you very much for saying that. the current valuation time, the success rates. That's the other question that Jeff Belltower wanted to ask. What's the success rates of placing a game you take on, and how long does it typically take from the contract that you offer to the contract with the publisher?
Yeah. So I recently did some math on that, like the success rate, and we are about like between 20 and 30% of a success rate. So there are games which we have in the portfolio, which we pitch to several publishers, maybe over the course of several fairs, and then in the end we just can't find anyone, and then we return the rights to the game designer. That happens. We also, as I said, have some games where we say, okay, that's a one-time shot. We have this one idea of where to place it, and if it doesn't work, then we return it. But that's, as I said, the 20 to 30. That's more or less the success rate. And then how long does it typically take? That's very different, like really also from game to game. There are games which are, which, as you also say, no? You are an experienced game designer. There are some games of which, yeah, a lot of people will want to have that. And there are some games which you're like, okay, I really have to think very straight. So where could it fit right now? Because I know that this is something that's bubbling. There are going to be several similar prototypes maybe cruising around. And I don't know if this is the best among them. I just know this is the best that we can make it. That's a thing. It's something that happens. That there's some unspoken trends within game designs, and then publishers tell us, okay, we've seen something similar from another game designer already. Well, this is better, the other was better, whatever. So just to answer the question, I think a year and a half maybe is reasonable, but that depends also on the point at which we sign a contract with the game designer. Because if the game still needs a lot of development from the moment where we sign it and we say, okay, we're going to go on this journey together, do some more play testing, then of course this whole process will take a little longer. And if it's something that's already very done or has already been released somewhere else, or the game designer is looking for someone to reprint it, for example, then of course it will go faster. But yeah, if we think that we have a chance of finding someone for it, we will continue with it, even though maybe the first fairs were not successful.
And at what point would the designer typically get the rights back? Is it a standard contract, may I ask, or is that different for every game?
No, there's a standard of, so we get the rights exclusively for 18 months. If we don't manage to sign the game within 18 months, then the game designer with 1 month in advance can terminate the contract and we'll get all the rights back. And if they don't, then the contract prolongs for another year. And then again, 1 month before that year ends, you can terminate the contract. So this is the regular thing. Once we place it, though, once we sign it with a publisher, then the contract is connected to the game being published by that publisher.
And the final question is, once it is published by the publisher, what is your share of royalties?
We have different standards. So usually if it's a first-time cooperation, usually also maybe where we need to, or a game where we need to invest a lot of time also still in the development process and in the testing and finalizing, then it's a 40% share. For everyone who joins us at the Stammtisch, and also games which are very, very like finished. So it's a 30%. And if it's...
Sorry, what's this Stammtisch?
Oh, Stammtisch, sorry, that's the weekly meeting. That's the German word for Schurfix. Do you have to say that in English? I don't know, like a weekly,
no,
a regular...
I mean, regular meeting. I don't know another word for regular meeting.
Okay, so that's English, Stammtisch is like a regular meeting in Austria.
Okay.
And then if it's a game that was already published and someone is looking for a reprint and asking us to find someone to reprint, or if it is published maybe, I don't know, in the UK and you're looking for publishers in Europe or whatever, like Europe. It's also Europe. Okay, like in the rest of Europe.
The EU or the rest of
Europe, or Asia or whatever, sure. Then that's a 20% rate for that.
Okay, Thank you very much for those very clear, straightforward answers. Um, that's been fantastic, and I have no questions left, which is very appropriate timing. So, if anyone wants to get any questions in, like you have about 30 seconds, I mean, you've had an hour so far, so you should have gotten them in earlier. But otherwise, um, Anita, could you again ask me a question of the day? Question of the day. What's the little question before we go on our way? And a question to ask me and anyone who's maybe watching this.
Okay, if you have a bad day, what's your strategy to like brighten yourself up?
Um, I mean, I don't know if this is inspired by my saying that I'm a bit down at the start of this, but I've got a few coping mechanisms. I mean, one is to tell other people that I'm feeling down, so I can hopefully get some sympathy. And sometimes, like yesterday, I went on um, like it was a very physical thing that I was doing with someone for more than 3 hours, and then during that, like we could have talked about whatever, but it was just basically me talking at them about what all the things that I'm annoyed at, just getting it off my chest. And the other thing that I did is I actually started a thread in Board Game Geek where I said, hey, what's a thing that makes you smile? And then I'm giving everyone who posts there a little bit of geek gold. And so I'm not responding to it, but if they just reply to it, other people, they don't get the geek gold. But if they write something that also makes me smile, then I give them the geek gold. And so that's my sort of every morning when I look at my
That's
Board
nice.
Game Geek subscriptions, because I'm subscribed obviously to my own games, and I'm also subscribed to currently Word games. So I see literally every game that's tagged with Words Game on Board Game Geek when it pops up. So I know basically all the Words games in existence. I mean, that's probably an exaggeration because, there'll be something that flies under radar. And also, talking about yesterday, Ruffle and Your Game, and also SMS, which is an earlier version of it, none of them have Words Game tagged in Board Game Geek. So it just goes to show a lot of things will not be tagged as board games, as Words Game. But anyway, um, yeah, kind of. But I think as far as activities, sometimes it is remembering the albums that make me smile, cycling, allowing myself to be silly. Yesterday, after I had this meeting and I was feeling a little bit lighter, and then I cycled, I was listening to Wet Leg. I don't know if you know the band. And
Yeah, I
then
love them.
kind of, I was literally dancing on my bicycle. I mean, I can't dance super well while I'm riding my bicycle because, my legs have to still be doing this motion. But then I stopped at the light and I was doing this, and then someone, because it's London, just came up to me like on the street. They weren't like in my face or dangerously or anything, but they were on the pavement and just looked at it, hey, like that kind of, a shared moment of exaltation and having this human connection, even if it's with someone else. The other thing I do self-care, frankly, is sometimes a little bit of personal grooming. I don't wash my hair as often as I feel I would like to, but it does always take about at least half an hour. Like if I'm washing my hair, it has to be at least half an hour. Like if I'm having a very quick shower and I'm literally doing nothing else, I can be in and out within 10 minutes. But like washing my hair, it adds like a good half an hour to the proceedings. But bits of self-grooming or like making myself a little bit closer to the way I want to look. But yeah, that's to everyone else, what is your method of lifting your spirits? Sometimes for me, I mean, this kind of chatting to people does lift my spirits a little bit, and sometimes getting out in the park. Honestly, today I've got a lot of work to do, and I might not be able to do all of it, but part of me is remembering that, someone on Discord sent me a super lovely message that said, you are worth something even if you're not being productive, which is like, a super lovely thing. And Rita says, talking to people. I love that. Like, I can totally understand that. Maya says, I used to watch your stream for that personal connection. I do miss that, honestly. I mean, you're honestly welcome anytime. And if you want to chat on the stream, like we can chat about your favorite games or anything. I mean, it doesn't need to be necessary. I don't want to just have people on my stream who are necessarily published designers or game agents or whatever. But yeah, genuinely, like it would be lovely to have you on. I also used to really enjoy going and seeing the ducks, but for whatever reason, the joy
Going
of
where?
that to the park. You know,
Ah,
the ducks,
Pakistan.
die Ente.
Yeah. Enter.
Uh,
Yeah.
ja, ich verstehe ein bisschen Deutsch. Nur ein bisschen.
Well, you speak
um,
very well.
Thank you very much. No, I don't. But actually, sorry, I should accept a compliment. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you having told me that. And the truth is, like a year ago, I might not have accepted that compliment, but because of a game about drawing creatures, complimenting the drawings and complimenting the compliments, I have actually gotten better at valuing the compliments. And sometimes I do look up, reviews of games that I know were positive. So I look up the reviews that I've already seen. So it's like, oh yeah, there was a review many years ago where they really loved In a Bind, which is now known as Yogi. I will look that up again just to remind myself that people have enjoyed my things and hopefully. But yeah, I used to go to see the ducks, but that walk, I don't know what it is, but it's just become a little bit less exciting, I guess, because now I've done it so many times. Maybe I just need to turn left instead and make the walk slightly longer so I can still get some joy out of it. So I'm seeing new scenery or something.
Yeah,
or maybe I need to start going in the other direction and go up the hill where there's no ducks, but then I get to see a lovely view.
Yeah, and also you can only enjoy that for a couple of months more, right, as you're moving?
Well, I'm moving in next year, so I mean it's more than a couple of months.
That's half a year. It's not...
But it has been lovely chatting to you. And for everyone out there, not just what do you do when you get upset, but what do you do generally? Over to you. What's your up to? You can share, but only if you want to. So whether it's something that you're looking forward to doing, something that you need to be doing, please let us know. Anita, what's the plans for your day?
My plans for today are later, like there will be some a freelance game editor joining us for lunch later today. And we speak about some projects that we do together. I'm looking forward to that. Haven't seen him that much since the pandemic, or not as much as I wanted to. So I'm looking forward to seeing Marcus. And in the evening, there is time for Wushu practice. And I'm also very much looking forward to that.
That sounds fantastic. Maya says, I'm looking for a job and I wish you all the best in getting good replies, positive replies. Obviously, just everything that you send off is itself an achievement, and I know that it can be really dispiriting when you, worst case scenario, just don't get told anything. And it's kind of weird because I sent a Facebook message to someone saying that I was a bit annoyed that I never heard anything from them because we're Facebook friends, and I applied to their company and they said, oh, I'm really sorry about that, I will look into it. But I think all the time, like, it does happen because people are too busy or people are disorganized. And actually, if we have time, how often would you chase up a publisher? That's my one question for you, Anita, before we, let's say you've spoken to a publisher, they're like, oh, I don't know, we'll think about it. If they haven't given an exact timeline for them to get back to you, how quickly would you reach back to the publisher?
It depends on the publisher. So very often you know from experience how long it usually takes them, and then you have a feeling for how long, if it's maybe too long. Also, it depends on the state of the game in general. So if I know that there are several interested, then I would maybe contact them all at once earlier, saying that that there's some competition out there. Also, I always try to get I always contact them when organizing new appointments for the next meeting, for the next fair. I always connect that to asking for
by the way, what happens with those things?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good structure of my work as well, because during the COVID, it was a bit of a a mess, my organization, because the whole organization of the year kind of broke up, because this fair didn't take place and that fair, and then publishers popped up with their own events, and like, this is an online Ravensburger online event and Hasbro online event and blah, blah. And so like every 3 weeks or so someone wanted to get something pitched, and I like to structure that and have like certain dates through the year where I and also the people I work with, the designers I work with, know, okay, if I want to get something done, the next chance is maybe now Nuremberg. So I know that by early January the game should be ready for final tweaks or such things, you know.
Yes.
And so I think also for the publishers, it's nice for them to get that these periods where I don't bug them and connect it to something that we have to speak about anyway.
But I think that one thing I've personally been bad at, and I'm going to hold my hands up and say, this is one thing that I'm feeling a lot of, I guess, shame about, is that I'm not generally good at just reaching back to people after a convention. I get all business cards and then I don't do anything with that. I don't say, hey, it was lovely to meet you, which I should. And right now I should probably go through all the things for Spiel and say, hey, it was lovely to meet you. And those games that I take, I look forward to hearing what's going on with them, because even though it's been just over a month, it's kind of, and I should have, reached out to them. Ideally, maybe the following week would be the perfect, if I was a robot. But I guess doing it now is better than not at all at the same time.
Yeah, true. I know the feeling. I also have to remind myself of doing these things.
So, let's talk about if people want to reach out, then they can get to White Castle. How else would you like people to find you on the internet?
Yeah, whitecastle.at is definitely a good spot. You can also find us on Facebook. That's Facebook/White Castle Games Agency. I don't even know. I'm so bad at White Castle Games. Facebook/White Castle Games. And you can also find us on Instagram, but my Instagram thing is a mess. So I have to, because I'm still using my private name for the, I have to take a workshop and figure out how to change that.
Or you could start a brand new account.
Or I could do that. I'm really not the social media person, so I always have to, I don't know.
Yeah, this completely, I was going to ask you about the whole Twitter debacle because, things are messing up. But let's not get into that. At this point, we're already way over time. If you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez all the places. stuffbybez.com/streams. For some reason, my Google Calendar has not been syncing with my thingy, but tomorrow, Alan, Paul, and I are going to be talking about auctions. And then Thursday to Sunday, I'll be away at the Gamers Gaming Getaway. And Monday next week, I will be with Lo Hua Xiang. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And I'm looking forward to meeting them. This is a 3D modeler and artist who's just entered the industry, and they've already got a couple of games under their belt. And I'm super excited to chat to them and get to know them and then learn what all of that means. It has been a delightful chat. We've chatted about so much. We chatted about which publishers you work with. We've chatted about the process of playtesting, why that's brilliant. And we talked about doing contracts and translations, being a game agent, the notion that you want specific games, like anything that's from the simplest game up to the lower levels of the Kennerspiel des Jahres. So even if it's a potential Kennerspiel des Jahres, it doesn't have to be a winner or a nominee to make it worth publishing. Of course not. That's not what we're saying. But even if it's of that level of complexity, it might be, it might not be. That's kind of where the blurry line is. It's all blurry. And we talked about the key features being about observation and listening. We talked about it taking about 3 months to get some sorts of feedback, but then up to 3 months, I should say. But it's always really good feedback. unless you just go to Vienna and then you can get instant feedback, but it might not be very good feedback, but it will be instant. And then we talked about it taking like up to a year and a half for games to get signed, but it's like maybe it doesn't mean that your game's guaranteed to be signed. There's like about 25% chance for, you to have a success, which is still a really good shot. And frankly, part of me, it's like, if you didn't have any misses, then it feels like you're not taking enough chances, if you know what I mean. Because if everything was a guarantee, then it would be like, well, why aren't you taking on the things that are a 50-50 shots? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we talked about the percentage of royalties, which was laid out, but it's between 20 to 40% for White Castle and between 80 to 60 for the designer or designers if there's multiple designers. And yeah, it's Rita Modal. I don't know if I mentioned Rita Modal's making taxes, and I hope you get to do something fun at the end of that. But share, spread the word. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you for all the chat. Thank you, Anita, most importantly, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I guess there's only one thing left to say, and that is, of course, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song to do. Bye, 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 bye. Thanks for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song to do. Bye, 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 bye. Thanks for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone.